Hey everyone, this is the Fantasy Uptick. I'm Jeremiah Blue, and today I'm going to be comparing two running backs that I really like from this year's rookie class in Cam Akers and J.K. Dobbins. The first thing I want to do is take a look at what teams they went to and figure out what kind of situation they're in. If we take a look at the Rams, they just lost Todd Gurley. So that's a huge loss. Todd Gurley had 223 rushes last year, not to mention his involvement in the passing game. And if you look at the other side, they had Mark Ingram and Gus Edwards. And even though the Baltimore Ravens ran the ball 399 times to the Rams 366 times, there's a bigger gap because Todd Gurley actually left the Rams. So for Cam Akers, who's going to the Rams, there's an opportunity for him to step right in as that lead back. I think Cam Akers is significantly better actually than Darrell Henderson or Malcolm Brown. So I think he could actually end up taking that Todd Gurley role. If you listen to a lot of the people in the media, they're going to say that it's going to be a running back by committee in LA. But last year, even with all the injury concerns and all the, we're going to alleviate some of the workload from Todd Gurley, they still ended up giving him a heavy workload. So Akers, I think it compares very well to Todd Gurley. Actually, he's athletic, he's strong, he's a powerful runner, he's a great pass protector for a rookie. And he worked behind a bad offensive line, and now he's going to be forced to work behind another bad offensive line. Had he not been behind that awful offensive line, I think he would have shown out. So if him and JK would have swapped places as far as teams they were on, I don't think there would have been much difference. They're two different styles of runner, but Cam Akers, to me, on tape, is a better runner in certain areas, and then JK's is a better runner in other areas. So we'll break those down as we move on. So then we look at the Baltimore Ravens with J.K. Dobbins. He's going to a team that really likes to run a dual running back. So even as good as Mark Ingram was last year, he was still splitting a lot of time with Gus Edwards. He played 15 games out of the 399 running back running back carries, because obviously they were the most running team, but over 100 of those are going to Lamar Jackson. So players that weren't the quarterback got 399 carries last year. Out of those 399, Mark Ingram only got 202. That's just not the way they want to do it, have a workhorse running back in that system. They want to rotate running backs in, as we could tell from last year. And the running backs, Mark Ingram was averaging 5 yards a carry, while Gus Edwards was averaging 5.3 yards a carry. I think J.K. Dobbins comes in as immediately the number 2. So he has value for this year because I believe he's going to get roughly 150 carries this year, assuming he plays all 16 games, or more if somebody gets hurt. But moving forward, once Mark Ingram is out, J.K. Dobbins is in line to be the lead dog. He could even be the lead dog starting next year with Mark Ingram being the change of pace back, similar to the way it worked with Kamara and Mark Ingram in New Orleans. That being said, Mark Ingram is going to be there probably the next 2 years. And after that, there's no guarantee that they don't use that draft pick on another second round pick because they want to do that 2 running back kind of set. There's a bunch of teams out there that are doing the running back by committee, even when they have good running backs. When I look at the Rams, even with an injured Todd Gurley last year, they didn't commit to the running back by committee. They had a workhorse, and now granted, he was making the contract that would demand that kind of workload, but at the same time, that's just a system thing. They had these other guys there. They used their first pick. That's huge for me. So the Rams used their very first pick on a running back, which to me tells me that they were not comfortable with that position group after releasing Todd Gurley. They thought they needed to go out and get somebody else. Darrell Henderson had a hard time seeing the field last year, and honestly, so did Malcolm Brown. So they're clearly not comfortable with that spot. That running back position's wide open, and Cam Akers, who's been amazing in college, if you just look at the stats, it doesn't show what Cam Akers actually was in college. You can totally see a situation where Cam Akers comes right off the bat, week 1, getting 15 carries, and then just it goes up from there. And by the end of the year, he's basically the workhorse back. Similar to a guy like Miles Sanders and Devin Singletary. One of the biggest stats that I look at when I look at the Rams is they were third to worst in yards per carry, right? Only 3.7 yards per carry. That was really bad. And if you look over at the Ravens, they were 5.5, but a lot of that is, again, Lamar Jackson. So if we just look at Mark Ingram, he was 5 yards a carry, and then Gus Edwards was 5.3. So it's still above a 5 yards per carry by their main running backs. So they're significantly better up front as far as the opportunities that the running backs are going to get when they're going to be more efficient while they do it. But the Rams, when they get in the red zone, like to give it to the running back. I know that's been Todd Gurley over the last 3 years, but since McVay's been there, they finished in the top 5 in running back touchdowns, to include last year when they finished 4th. And the teams in front of them, the Baltimore Ravens, Tennessee, and San Francisco. Of those teams, Tennessee and Baltimore have running quarterbacks. Obviously, Lamar Jackson accounted for 7 rushing touchdowns last year, and Tennessee's Ryan Tannehill accounted for 4. If they weren't there, they would have finished at number 2. And if we're just talking about non-quarterback rushing touchdowns, they would be 3 right behind the San Francisco 49ers and the Minnesota Vikings. So the Rams, when they're in the red zone, they like to give it to the running backs. Cam Akers is going to be the best running back on this team, and therefore will probably get the majority of that work in the red zone. On the other end, I think that if Mark Ingram goes down, if in 3 years J.K. Dobbins becomes the running back, which a lot of people are speculating, then that's what's going to happen. And I can see it happening. I'm not denying it's going to happen. If he ends up getting 70% of the workload and he works and he's in an offense with Lamar Jackson, I mean, he should be drafted in the top 5, because Lamar Jackson, what he does to defenses, because they can't commit to the run because they got to protect on the outside, is going to open up all sorts of lanes. That's why the running backs behind him are averaging such a large amount. The only problem with that is, based off of what I've seen since they brought in Lamar Jackson, it kind of feels like they're trying to go into that running back by committee. So even if Mark Ingram ends up leaving Baltimore in 2 years or retiring or whatever, I think there's still going to be some sort of committee going on in Baltimore, because that's the way the coaching staff's philosophy is. Next, we actually compare the two. So I told you I would tell you some of the stats that I found interesting about Cam Akers. Is he got 1,144 yards, averaging 5 yards a carry. You go on the other side, J.K. Dobbins obviously blew that away from a distance. If you just look at the numbers, 2,003 yards, 6.7 yards a carry. And I'm not knocking either one of these guys. I like both of these guys in both Dynasty and Redraft. Now, rookies typically go a little too high for my blood, but I do like them both in both formats. I like Cam Akers as a person who has an opportunity to be the workhorse back. So even last year, as bad as Todd Gurley was, if he takes Todd Gurley's role, Todd Gurley still finished as a workhorse back at the end of the year. He still had a lot of touchdowns. He still had a lot of attempts. He still had a lot of catches. So if Cam Akers can just be as good as Todd Gurley was last year and he gets that role, he's going to be a running back 1, right? Whereas J.K. Dobbins is going to be a backup year 1. And I think he'll be a backup year 2. And I don't think he'll be the featured back until year 3. And even then, I don't know that he'll be able to touch how many carries Cam Akers will be getting at that time if he's the feature back of the St. Louis Rams. And yes, the St. Louis Rams offensive line is garbage. But next year, things change. And the year after that, things change. They're going to obviously fix the offensive line eventually. That's something that they have to prioritize, because that is their biggest weakness. And while it might not look good this year, his workload is going to overcome the efficiency that J.K. Dobbins is, and that's basically what I'm banking on next year. If you're asking me which running back will be more efficient next year, it's going to be J.K. Dobbins, because he's going to be playing behind Lamar Jackson and that Ravens offense, whereas on the other end, Cam Akers is going to be behind an awful offensive line, but a decent enough offense. If he's involved and he's the workhorse, he could still get opportunities, and they like to run in the red zone. They constantly finish in the most in the rushing touchdowns. If he's the rushing touchdown guy on that team, he's still going to put up fantasy points for you, especially in like standard formats. Again, I'm not knocking J.K. Dobbins. Even though he was running behind the 4th best offensive line according to Pro Football Focus in college football, he still had to play against 8 of the top 25 run defenses during his senior season. On the other end, Pro Football Focus ranked 130 college football offensive lines. The Florida State offensive line finished 129. That means there was one other team that they rated that was worse than Florida State's offensive line. That's ridiculous. Honestly, if it's Florida State, you shouldn't have the 129th worst offensive line, but they did. And if you Taking into account that Cam Akers was able to average 5 yards per carry behind that offensive line his senior year. So basically he averaged 3.91 yards after contact. They were giving him no room to operate. And if you go back and you watch the tape from Florida State, Cam Akers, he runs over people. He makes people miss. He had the 4th best missed tackle rate. He made 26 people miss for every 100 carries. He was able to make people miss, run people over, create yards after contact. He's a very aggressive, tough runner. There are definitely things, I mean, J.K. Dobbins isn't bad either. And again, I keep going back. Just because I like Cam Akers a little bit more does not mean J.K. Dobbins is not a good back. These are very, very close for me. J.K. Dobbins had a 3.5 yard after contact in his own right, and he had more running room, so he was obviously able to average quite a bit more yards per attempt than Cam Akers. You take a look at their vision. It's kind of hard to analyze vision in college because one was playing behind the 4th best offensive line, so the holes are huge, and the other one's playing behind the worst offensive line, so there's no room to run. You're having to basically run over people. Is he being impatient and talking about Cam Akers, or was there never going to be a hole that opens up if he would have just delayed and he's having to run through people? So if we're talking about power, and I was talking about the yards after contact, Cam Akers is definitely the more powerful runner. The question that I have is that going to translate to the NFL? Obviously, we've seen guys who are power runners in college. They go to the NFL and they're not able to run people over in the NFL, or that style doesn't work for them because, again, people are bigger and stronger in the NFL. Cam Akers is able to squat 600 pounds. There's like a YouTube video about him doing that. So he is a very strong, powerful dude. I think it's going to translate, at least early on in his career. His running style definitely is something that could end up having a short career because he does take a lot of contact. Talking about speed, J.K. Dobbins did a run of 40 at the combine. I think that's probably why he fell a little bit in the draft because you can't really put a number on his speed when you can with other guys. I think J.K. Dobbins is faster than Cam Akers. I think J.K. Dobbins is one of the faster running backs in this draft. Speed-wise, he's a take-it-to-the-house kind of guy, and he did that a lot in Ohio State. Pass pro, I would give that one to Cam Akers, although I think for being rookies, they're both really good at pass protection based off of them being rookies. Usually rookies don't come out and can be trusted in the pass pro. I actually think that Cam Akers was amazing in pass pro. If you go back and watch the tape, he's just a very aggressive, it's just in his nature. He's an aggressive football player. He's a fun guy to watch. And then catching, J.K. Dobbins a little bit better at catching, but Cam Akers can get out there and run routes. J.K. Dobbins probably has better hands. They're about even as far as their ability to run routes and get open. That's my analysis on these two guys. If I'm doing redraft or dynasty, I'm taking Cam Akers redraft because I think he's going to have more of an opportunity this season, and then dynasty because I think he's going to be a featured back throughout his career, whereas I think J.K. Dobbins, even though he'll be more efficient per touch throughout his career, I don't think that he's in a situation where they're going to allow him to ever get over like the 250 touches per year range. While that's still a lot, I think that's the high end of what he'll end up being as long as he stays for the Baltimore Ravens. They keep running the offense the way they're running it. That's it for today's show. I really appreciate you guys tuning in. Drop a like, subscribe, let me know what you think in the comments. Till next time, see ya.